being earmarked to solve ecological or environmental problems.
Yeah.
The question is, are there no monies earmarked for it? We know that there are monies because they are deducted from FAC.
Yeah.
So the monies are there. But the question will be, where are those monies going to? And do we have good monitoring and evaluation of the process by which those monies would be used for? For example, if contractors come forward to the Ecological Fund Office, the EFO, to say, okay, fine, we want to plant like 1 million trees, we want to, you know, solve this erosion problem and all of that. Are those contracts followed to full details? That is the question, I think, so that we don't mix everything up. You understand what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's not that.
That's the Nigerian factor. But you know, there's one thing I try to give somebody credit. You know, when this administration came in, there is this attitude of we're going to the business as usual will not take place again. Okay? But yeah, within that first year, we saw the fear factor came in. Everybody is keen. TSA is working. And so, but to me, I am yet to see the seriousness on the side of policymakers as to putting the money at the appropriate place. You know, and honestly...
So you mean the diversion of funds?
Absolutely.
Like this ecological...
It's still there. Because to me, there was no basis for us to say, you know, most of those mitigating projects and adapting projects, there's no basis for them to look for funds. For goodness sake, domestic, the ecological funds is a very good source of DRM, domestic resource mobilization. The money is there. Please, Nancy, I want policymakers to be very serious. Monitor this project. That's why the Federal Minister of Finance talked about efficiency, financial intelligence and all that. Let them be very serious to monitor, you know, resources that are meant to specific projects, just like the Ecological Fund, that will seek to ensuring that Nigeria is on the path of green growth. Let me tell you.
Okay, let me halt you a bit, because if we take a look, it's no longer news that we have various environmental problems across the country. Lagos just witnessed the flood, not just Lagos, even other states, rivers, and all of that. From my last data, I do think that the Ecological Fund has about 3.6 billion naira, which, of course, from the National Economic Council meeting that was done the last time, I think in May, about 13 billion naira will be shared across board for those states that didn't get. So they will have a balance of 20 billion. But even at 20 billion naira, for me, I still think it's still not enough. That's my own assessment. That is not enough to mitigate some of these issues. Now, let's take a look at like what we're seeing right now on the screen, flooding. We've seen that, of course, when flood happens, a lot of environmental problems come into being. Lives will be lost, properties will be lost, livelihoods and all of that. People will even start relocating. If you don't have money, you start looking for a stopgap measure. What do you think, the impact assessment on the economy?
Well, that's what we've been saying. Climate change has a very direct impact on the economy in so many areas. Flooding is just a symptom of climate change. Desertification is a symptom of climate change. So when you look at these impacts, clearly you see a direct correlation between the recession that we're going through and what has happened to us. Why do I say that? When you have flooding, you have agricultural loss, vast hectares of land flooded, some of the produce destroyed. You have people who engage in aquatic farming and business. That also gets washed away. Then you have damage to infrastructure. And then in the immediate sense, states that have budgeted money to do infrastructural development now have to use the funds to do relief and evacuation and those kinds of things. So it has a direct impact on the economy. But what I want to look at, getting back to the Ecological Fund, historically what you see is that it has been a tool of political patronage, has been a tool of political vendetta setting, as has been alleged most recently. If a particular party is in power, they exclude the opposition from the money. Because there hasn't been a rigorous adherence to criteria in giving these funds. Presidents dole it out during election period. Thank you. It's used as a cash infusion for election. In some cases, look at Nigeria Extractive Industry.
That's Nati.
Nati did an audit. Study. Yes, and found that out of about 200 billion that was earmarked for within a period of 2007, 2011, a lot of the funds were diverted. In one instance, we had funds being used to build a mall in the FCDA. That's not an ecological problem. We've also seen cook stoves, up to 9 billion earmarked for cook stoves.
Some money is diverted even to works, to do roads and all that.
So the problem we have is failure of enforcement. I always say this. If you have a structure where the enforcement mechanism is weak, as an adjunct professor of law, I have access to volumes of environmental laws and regulations dealing with the Nigerian environment. We are not lacking in the quantum of laws and regulations we have crafted. What is always missing is the will to enforce. And sometimes we have structural defects. As I explained, the complex structure we have dealing with ecological funds and the fact that it is subject to discretion of the president. It should not be discretionary. We should have a transparent set of criteria. If you meet the criteria as reviewed by a committee, then you will access the funds.
Shouldn't it end at the table of the president, or there should be an independent body that should assess that?
I think there should
so
be
that there won't be political
I think there should be an independent body, devoid of political partisanship. Because as I said, people are suffering at the grassroots. We have Southeast erosion is ravaging a lot of the communities, but if you're not aligned to the center, then you don't get the ecological funds that you should get. And that has been the history. I'm pointing to history now. So we need to review the structure. We need to review the enforcement mechanism. Sometimes you find collusion between government officials and contractors.
But it seems that even as we need to do all these things, environmental problems are not waiting for us, or forces of nature are not waiting for us. We had what happened in 2012. Now, some states in Nigeria experience flooding, erosion. I know in Anambra State is really very bad. In some states there. In the north is also very bad. Deforestation and all of that. I know there used to be a national afforestation program. Absolutely. I don't know about it now, but I know there used to be.
Nancy, let me come to that. But before I get, let me put this flooding in proper context. Flooding within the Nigerian context and West Africa has 5 different scenarios. One is precipitation, when there is this long rainfall over a long period of time. So infiltration becomes a problem. What happens next? Runoff. That's flooding. The next one is what we call the flash floods. Like what happened in northern Nigeria, hard baked soil, ground. It's so hard that when there's rainfall is intense, it doesn't percolates, the infiltration becomes a problem, flooding. Next is the melting ice cap. That's as a result of high level, temperature level high, rising temperature. The ice is melting, and you saw the ocean surging and sea level rise. That's what happened at Ahmad Bello Way, in Victoria Island, and the coastal areas are, flooded. The next is deforestation. When you leave the vegetation cover, the soil is exposed and is bare. Infiltration becomes a problem. What you see that channel, because when you are forest, you are creating a channel. Transportation means for that channel for the water, and it's bare. Before you know it, there's runoff. That's flooding. Last but not the least, the urbanization. With destruction of vegetation cover, what we see is the concrete and the tarmac, when you see the rain, it does not infiltration because the problem says the runoff. So it's a challenge.
How about these short drainages?
That's concrete. That's concrete. And that's part of the issue. So it's the scenario within the Nigerian context. The problem we have in this country, we don't have data. These are adaptation measures. For us to contain flooding, we have 2 scenarios within this climate change, mitigation and adaptation. Where are the data to early warning when you have sea level rise? When your ship is baiting, where are the data for early warning to guard against those in the coastal area? Where are the data for for the agricultural
Where does
practice talked
NEMA
about.
come into all of this? Because I know the meteorological agency comes up to say, okay, there will be flooding this year, or Nigerians prepare the temperature of the weather.
That is beyond weather. That's the other time when we had I told NEMA don't go well, but it's not beyond weather forecast and all that. You need to come down, build capacity. It has gone beyond weather forecasting. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's why we talk about capacity building. I was there, the DG of Nigerian Hydrological Service. We had one program the other time. I asked him that same question. Do you have data on variability? The Niger State lost. One man lost seven families. It's not about giving them 500,000 to come. That's not vulnerability data is all about. So we need to come back to basics. Think out of the box. Be ever ready. When you have data, you are ready to plan. When you don't have data, you can't plan.
Okay, the doctor, come in here, because for me, like, we're talking about the issue of flooding right now.
Yes.
Flooding is a global phenomenon. It's not just to Nigeria. Even advanced countries do suffer it, and they seem not to. Yes, right. They are still trying to wriggle out of it.
Yeah, but there's a difference. Flooding is a natural phenomenon, but what we're witnessing now is unprecedented.
Absolutely.
For some of the reasons he pointed out. We have climate change issues exacerbating, and it's going to get worse. I was here 2012, we talked about this, and I predicted we will have more recurrent and more severe flooding. Absolutely. Why? Because the sea level, the sea level now is higher.
Absolutely.
Arctic ice has melted, pumped a lot of water into the seas, so you're going to have coastal flooding more. What do we need to do? We need to build better barriers.
So where does he live? Like states like Lagos? That has been said, Lagos may not be there in 50 years if nothing is done.
You need to build barriers and levees. You need to build proper drainages.
Absolutely.
We need to educate our population.
Yes.
Indiscriminate dumping of refuse exacerbates the problem.
Absolutely.
This ecological fund ought to be a preemptive, a proactive fund that looks at what is likely to happen. How are we going to deal with even our damming issue? We have just Niger State, they had a problem. The Suleja, the reason we have flooding in Suleja is because the dam management was not properly done. In my view, the water overflowed its banks and washed people away because of the dam. So the dam management issue is very critical. We know flooding is going to become a more recurrent decimal in the system. So we need to be proactive. Ecological fund should be devoted to early warning system, preemptive evacuation of people.
Sure.
You talk about people in Ibadan, they have been flooded for decades, year in, year out. Those people do not need to live in those areas. They need to be moved and relocated properly. You look at some areas along the river banks of Niger and Benue, those people need to be moved because those are natural drainage and watershed areas that you shouldn't be living in. But because of cheap land, people will go and live in these areas that are not fit for human habitation. So the fund should be used for proactive engagement, gathering of data, building capacity in the
fund,
system.
we should also say funds NEMA, isn't it? Ecological fund funds NEMA and the Great Green Wall project, isn't it? If you also take a look at NEMA, it's just emergency when
things happen.
Even new map.
They share bread.
New map also, that erosion water management. New map, the fund is also some allocation for erosion control.
Now, I'm so interested in perhaps the commercial city, the commercial nerve center of the country, because Lagos, for example, churns close to 300 billion naira every year. That's talking about the IGR. We're not looking at other economic activities, because for Lagos, for example, you have the natural occurrence of fresh water and also the ocean's surge. That's right. We saw what happened the last few weeks, Lekki VI, and we also know we remember what happened. It was in Morocco. 1991, that was demolished. Who demolished? Is it Raji Rasaki?
Raji Rasaki, yes. That's right.
You're demolished it then because of this flooding issue. But it seems that we have not yet found a permanent problem. Is it just about sand filling? Because before I left Lagos, or even sometimes I travel to Lagos, you see, I'll be like passing where so much water. Is it lakes now? They call it. You see sand filling. I'll be like, they really want to suppress this water. So where will this water go to? Filling with sand.
See, Nancy, that is why the market failure. Why market fails is because we fail to address these ecological challenges. market, why it failed. So now, what happened is that the green growth measures are holistic and interdisciplinary. Until government begin to realize the need to sit down to plan, to know what mitigation and adaptation measure is all about. Most people, they don't know. That's why we need to sit down to educate them. What are they here? Talked about early warning signs. That's an adaptation measure. Let me tell you, I want to thank the Lagos State being very proactive. I know when they are applying that the Eco Atlantic, you saw you saw the measures. You saw I've seen the environmental and social impact assessment of that project. That's wonderful. But that's beyond ASIA. You also need to sit down to get a roadmap on how to do that. That roadmap is to what? Number one, Nigeria should begin to do what to call MRV, that measurement, reporting, and verification of data. That MRV system is what we use now to drive any project all over the world, even your sustainable development project. So that project, I must tell, even states should key in. As I'm talking to you now.
I'm about asking, what is the role of the state governors? Because you just said Lagos is trying.
Yeah.
But other governors.
Unfortunately, there is this federalism, federal locals. We believe that when Abuja coughs, everybody, sneezes, everybody catches cold. The rent mentality. Not thinking out of the box. You still think, I want to go back to state, to federal, to collect ecological fund. That mentality, Lagos State they've thought out of the box. And that's why we are making progress. States should key in to think, this is a federal structure. Find a way of trying to address your own problem, and you don't just begin to wait for federal government to give you allocation, to give you, get there for your allocation and all that.
Okay.
So states should.
Interestingly, the states and the local governments also get a share of this ecological fund directly. Yeah. But everybody looks at the federal share, and that's where the action is, because it tends to be bigger. But what we need to do, even at the state level, the states have a primary obligation to their citizens. Yeah. If you don't address the ecological problems, it depresses your IGR within the state. Yeah. If you have farms washed away, you have livelihoods displaced, you have
shops
people
closed and all that.
The internally generated revenue of the state decreases. So you have a vested interest in making sure that your environmental hazards are addressed, even at the local government level. One of the things I'm advocating to the government is we need to really decentralize. Everybody's talking about restructuring now. We need to decentralize how this ecological funding scheme works. Communities ought to be able to make a request, because even certain communities, certain local governments, if they are not aligned with the state governor, they may not have their issues addressed. And erosion will be ravaging their community, flooding. But if maybe that particular local government did not support the governor, so that one will not get any real attention. And that's not how it's supposed to work. We need to look at the human aspect of ecological funds.
Let me take a look at the way the EFO works itself, the Ecological Fund Office. It has a permanent secretary, isn't it? And it's domiciled in the secretary of SGF. How the officials and all of that, the system at which the EFO works, is it an efficient system?
For now, not. What's the panacea? Build capacity. It's not a.
Is it a matter of building capacity?
Oh yeah, you need to.
There are other things, because
see.
I'm thinking of going beyond capacity. Because you can build capacity. People can have. Hold on, doctor. You can have people that have capacity, but I still have the tendency to do what is not right.
You see, when you let me tell you.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I understand. Yeah. When you build capacity, there is this question of knowledge. There is confidence. You don't cheat me, and I will not. I will not shunt. Look, you have been in this money line for so many years, all right? So nobody can tell you. You know the purity of this money line. So there's this air of confidence that, look, I know this thing, so I want to set the pace. That's the essence of awareness, knowledge sharing. Building capacity is knowledge sharing and awareness, coming together. Please, and the second thing is that there should be stakeholder engagement. What is happening right now is that when you plan, you don't allow it to whittle down. Just like he said, let these projects come from the community. Yes. Look, the economic philosophy of Rwanda today is community-based. They place climate change on the premise. That's why the man won 98%. And you empower the people. It is the committee, this project, the ecological project, and not from the Abuja. It is coming from the committee in Sokoto, in Kebbi, and all that. So the stakeholder engagement, that's why it's a building capacity. You now know that it's not about the top bottom, it's an up.
Bottom to the top.
Absolutely. So the PAM secretary there, so no, I'm not interested. Let me see this community that has this problem. Let's have an engagement with them. That is confidence building. That is what I'm saying on capacity building. So look, I peer review the Great Green Wall, and I say to them that we need to go back to revisit those 11 states.
Now, you know what's coming to my mind just before we end the show? What is the role of the National Assembly in all of this? Because they are the ones representing the people. Because if you're also talking about stakeholder engagement, the rural woman in my village, or perhaps in Agulo, Anambra State, or in one of these local areas in the north that is ravaged by deforestation or something, or even the Niger Delta oil spill, may not have access to the PAMSEC or whoever here. But our House of Rep members and our senators do have access to them, and that's why they were sent there. So what is their role, actually?
Exactly.
I don't know, I think Chidoka, Honorable Chidoka went...
Chairman Committee
Yes,
Environment.
I think I need to get him here one of these
Exactly
days.
what I was saying. See, if it emanates from the community level, now it rises up. You have state assemblies, and then those also have, you have constituency areas where you have rep members at the national level, you have senators. Those need to be engaged with their communities. They see what is going on. They drive through some of these roads. They drive through, they suffer. Their communities, the citizens come to them and complain. So I think we need to have an all-inclusive approach to this thing. It cannot just come from state governors. And sometimes that request is for political expediency, not to address the needs of the citizenry.
Now, finally, yes, you just talk about that very quick because I have a minute to close.
Yes.
Finally, how do we address these environmental problems, even with the financial constraints? Because I'm not ignorant that we have financial constraints now. So the government is also torn at solving a lot of issues at many times, so to speak, with small funds.
Yeah, let me see. If there is one section of assembly that has done well in terms of climate change issue, is the 8th National Assembly. As I speak to you as a consultant among the 10 consultants experts that are looking at the climate change bill, framework bill, is now at the public hearing. The House of Reps has done that. When they resume, Senate will concur. Before the end of this year, there will be a law, climate change bill, that will now help to drive this process of mitigation and adaptation measures. Very wonderful. The leadership of the National Assembly have been very, very key and very.
I don't want
then
to say
finally,
you're a bit,
with respect to funding,
because you are one of the consultants.
No, it's not. The law is open. It's just there. But with respect to the funding, I would say the panacea to this is a regreening program.
Okay.
Regreening program, and I want funding should be made available in the Forestry Department of Environment. That is the focal point, because they can't contribute so much in TSA and little is available for them.
Historically, we've had as much as 50 billion naira per year for ecological fund issues. That's a lot of money, Nancy. If judiciously applied and we have vigilant monitoring, that's a lot of money to do a lot of good. That's just at the national level. Remember, as I said, some money also goes to the states, to the local government. That's a lot of money that you can use to do a lot of visible projects that will save lives and safeguard the economy.
Okay, let's leave it at that. Of course, my own agenda every day on this show is how we can improve the nation's economy and, borrowing your words, safeguarding the economy so that it doesn't, it's so fragile now, so that it doesn't scatter, you know. But many thanks for joining us on the show. All right, I'll try as much as possible to see if I can get Honorable Chidoka, because I know he's been trying quite a lot to, on this environmental.
And the Buka and
okay. I'll talk about that later. Many thanks for joining us. I've been speaking with Dr. John Osonwa, who is a development economist and a green practitioner to my right, and Dr. John Osonwa, a climate change and an environmental expert to my left. We've been looking at the ecological funds and environmental problems in Nigeria, financial constraints, and the impact on Nigeria's economy. Let's get down to action and not talk. It's only when there's flooding or a natural disaster that we remember, ecological fund, we need to solve these natural disaster problems. All right, many thanks for joining us. Please join us again tomorrow for another edition of Moneyline with Nancy. Be the best you can be that change that you want to see. I am Nancy Nnaji. The news is up next.